participant logged in.
Yes.
I think you have to direct them, Shankar, to go to YouTube in case it gets filled up. Okay. Yeah. Let's go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome to another edition of our evening talk. We have been keeping you busy since the time of the first lockdown commenced, and then thereafter we have done number of talks, and over a period of 2 months, we have more than 80,000 people watched our talks over the last 2.5 months. Actually, that's indeed creditable. It clearly shows how much interest people show for the management topics, what's being presented to you by Madras Management Association. Before get on to the today's thing, which we are all eagerly looking forward, and I will request Mr. Balraman to take it forward. Let me briefly tell you what's happening next few days in MMA, so that if by any chance you missed your inbox, you don't miss this outstanding program. What's being bringing it to you, what's being brought to you by MMA regularly. On the 17th of Wednesday, 17th of June. We are bringing it to you, the Immune Organization. You know, Jasprit Bindra, the founder of Digital Matters, is one of the outstanding brain in digital area, and he's going to be talking. We're all finding about vaccine for our COVID, but you should also find a vaccine for your organization to be immune against digital and various initiatives. So it's going to be very interesting. Another unique event which we are bringing it to you on the 18th of June is Women in Politics. We really want to know why women not coming in a big way to politics, why the reservation is not really coming through. It's been fought for the last 40 years in the parliament, not getting voted. Though we have reservation at Panchayat Raj level, reservation parliament level is not happening. Why is it happening? Because of financial independence or women not interested in politics? We got some outstanding parliamentarian who is going to be discussing this. We have Agatha Sangma, she'll be confirming it to us. Khushbu Sundar, you know, she doesn't need introduction. Nupur Sharma, you see her regularly in the television, national spokesperson for BJP. Then Regana Hamir is an elected member of London City Corporation. And in conversation, they'll be doing with Lakshmi Ramakrishnan, actor, filmmaker, and activist. On the 20th, we have another interesting event under the Pond Leaders Speak Series, Survival and Recovery from Pandemic through Industry 4.0. We have Mr. Chandramouli, former Managing Director of Star Heket Machines Tools Private Limited. He'll be talking to us. Note down is again under the Leaders Speak Series of Pond's Fragrance of Business. 23rd, again, very unique event, parliamentary democracy in COVID time. While we have come across that parliament around the world have been functioning either online or many other ways, but Indian parliament is yet to function because they are discussing how to do that. And but as far as we are concerned, there's no secret in parliamentary function because it's all webcast live. To discuss on this, we have some outstanding panelists. Mr. N.K. Premachandran, Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha from Kerala. Naresh Gujaral, you all know, son of former Prime Minister of India, Mr. Gujaral, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. Mr. G. Ramesh, he is a Professor of Public Policy from IIM Bangalore. And Mr. Madhavan, who is a co-founder and president of PRS Legislative Research, will be moderating the session. Then on the 24th, we have Leadership Excellence Manuvara. Then on 27th, again under Pond Leadership Series, Financial Planning and Management in COVID times, Mr. N.K. Prasad, former Group CEO, CAMS Private Limited, will be talking to us. This is again very, very interesting because he's got a clear, he really going to bring it why foreign direct investment is coming in a big way, what is the psyche of Indian investors under the present scenario. I think it's going to be an interesting evening. So with this, I will stop it. There are much more. We already planned the entire series of lectures for the month of July and August too. But coming to today's topic, because we want to start on time at 6 o'clock, where we are reached now, 6 o'clock. Coming to today's topic, what is high performance culture and do you drive it as a leader in these times of rapid change? To talk to us, we have Tyagarajan, who is the most well-known thought leader around the world, CEO of GENPACT. And to do that, let me have the privilege of welcoming Mr. Balraman and also welcoming all the people who have joined us, veterans from the Ponds. And this is the first time before we even commence, my house is full. More than 100 people already logged in. That clearly indicates those who are not logged in, not to get disappointed because due to security reason, we restrict to only 100 people on Zoom. Other people, please log in YouTube, Facebook, and also our live webinar is available for you to viewing. And thank you for your overwhelming response. And I think as the things go, we may have to increase the number, but due to security reason, we are not able to do that. Now, coming to today's topic, let me have the privilege of, you should know why we are doing this. And what is the way forward? How is it going to be really? It's all master class in terms of management for each of the lectures have been planned and designed to talk more about the series and also about what in store. Why are we doing the Ponds culture? Let me have the privilege of welcome Mr. Balraman, who is our past president of MMA. May I have Mr. Balraman's yes, Mohan. May I have the slide of Mr. Balraman's profile, please? Yes, Mr. Balraman, this is a profile of thing you need, but what I want to tell about Mr. Balraman is Balraman is known for his acumen and known for his, what, in fact, the MMA got transformed when he was a president. He was the first president who served over a period of 2 years, and he's always a great well-wisher of MMA. So one such initiative is what today you are seeing, a great initiative of Pons Ventures talking only at MMA platform. That is a great honor, privilege for us. And he's been very close to us. He always tell what should be done, how to take MMA to next level. All the time he's been at us so that to bring the best out of us. In fact, I can always say it's the adrenaline who pumps us to bring the best out of us to present to you. Mr. Balraman, very warm welcome to you. Over to you, Mr. Balraman. Introduce the speaker as well as introduce the Leader Speak series on Pons. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. So, to all of you, a very warm welcome. Why are we doing this series? We are doing this series because operating as a very small company called Pons India Limited, an MNC company operating in what India considered a non-essential sector of the Indian industry, which is cosmetics and toiletries. We faced enormous challenges in terms of very high punitive taxation. Like I said in the last meeting, 120% excise duty on our products and 70% tax on what the government considered super profits. And the government even asked us, why should we allow you to continue? And imposed an obligation to earn hard currency foreign exchange, because in those days, hard currency was very scarce in India. All this happened during George Fernandez days. So the company decided to take this on as a contribution we can make to the Indian subcontinent. And the only resource we could rely upon, being small as we were, was the human resource. We started recruiting top talent from the premier management institutions in the country, paying them very well. The pay was not to be looked at only in monetary terms, but it reflected on the self-worth of the individuals joining us. What was more important was that it reposed total confidence and trust in these youngsters. And youngsters below 30, 23 to 25, 27, were given huge responsibilities of building the cosmetic business against great odds and building hard currency exports, competing with others in Western markets. We trusted these individuals. We reposed total confidence in them. Pons did not believe in control systems. We believed in the human being. And our motto was character, culture, and competence. And we were very clear that competence without character and culture will not be accepted by us. And the reason we did this was we had a clear insight that when people join us, they are joining us for our ethics and high values. For we had nothing else. We could not offer size. We could offer only challenges. So that insight proved right. People were very happy to be working for a company with very high ethics. And people were very happy to be trusted. And we found that they worked very hard to not let down the trust. Although, mind you, they were free to fail, and that was not a problem. So we learned a lot in doing this. And we thought that we should share it in today's environment where many companies look at performance above everything else. We think that's not the correct approach. That's not a long-term sustainable approach. That is our viewpoint. In order to see what people who worked for us earlier and went on to build huge companies elsewhere in the Western world and even in Japan and Singapore, we have started this series. This series is, in fact, to exchange learnings both ways, from you and to us and from us to you. Now, to Tiger. What can I say about him? There is everything that you want to know is available in the net, and it's also available in what Group Captain Vijay Kumar has sent to you. You all know that, I mean, once I tell you that he's the chief executive officer of a $3.5 billion company, which is valued at $8 billion in New York Stock Exchange, with 98,000 people in over 25 countries around the world, that tells you everything you want to know about him. And not only this, in 2005, this company was only $500 million and with just 25,000 people. In the last 14 years, Tiger and his predecessor was there till 2010, and Tiger took over in 2011. They had grown this company at a CAGR rate of 15%, while people numbers had grown at a CAGR rate of 12%. In other words, he had also got very high productivity. And when I asked Tiger what exactly is a strategy for doing this, he laughed. He said, strategy. Any day culture will eat strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, that is very curious to me. How is that possible? What exactly is culture? I can't put my hand around this very nebulous thing called culture. And he operates in over 25 countries, like Japan to Indonesia to Singapore to America to France, Germany, India. I mean, there's nothing called common culture. There are countries where women are not considered equal to men, whereas Tiger's policy is that everyone in the team is the same. Now, how exactly is he doing this? I mean, I really do not understand this. I'm very, very curious to listen to him and to learn. But what is most interesting about Tiger are a few other things. I guessed Tiger's age at 51. And he laughed. He is very particular that I should tell you that his age is 59. And I infer that is because he worked for Ponds. Let me see who differs from me. The second very interesting thing about Tiger is that he likes to run 11 to 12 kilometers every day. And soon after he finishes this webinar, he's going to do that. And he likes running in near empty New York, crossing various bridges. There are two rivers, as you know. One is the Hudson River, another is the East River. And he tells me there are 23 bridges, and he will do at least 2 to 4 bridges a day. He loves films in any language, he says. And I'm very, very keen to engage him in a conversation, preferably over some liquor. Tiger is also very, very interested in a few things. You see, about Sri Ramachandra, Lord Rama, in India, we used to say, Oka Mata, Oka Partner, Oka Patni. That is one word and one arrow and one wife. Tiger follows that in all three. He has got one wife called Vijay Lakshmi, and he has got one son called Anubhav. So, Oka Patni, Oka Putra. Now, but he also has one Oka company, which is GENPACT, and he has got Oka principle, which is culture. We are very keen to listen to him on this. How exactly is he managing this? And so I'm now on to you, Tiger. Why is he called Tiger? He said to me that way back in school, there was a poem called Tiger, Tiger. And he came out of the class laughing, jumping, and his friends started calling him Tiger. And Jack Welch came to India, and the Tiger was a young trainee. He said Jack Welch was remembered his particular name and went back and talked about it. So he became Tiger Tyagarajan. He also lives up to his other name, Tyagarajan, which is the king of sacrifices. What does he sacrifice? He has sacrificed being with his family. His family is in Delhi, and he is all alone in New York. So, Tiger, on to you.
Thank you, Group Captain and Mr. Balraman, for very, very kind words and glowing introduction. I'm humbled. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining what I consider to be a learning session for myself because I'll share some thoughts that I've had, some beliefs that I've had, that we've had as we've grown through our careers and learnings. And hopefully I'll learn even more from today's session than I can impart and share some of my learnings. Before I start, I want to reflect back to what Mr. Balraman said about ponds. As he was describing those days, it took my mind back to 1985. On the 2nd of April, 1985 is when I joined Ponds as my first job in Bombay, in the Bandra office in Ponds in sales. I walk into the office at about 8:30 a.m. and by 2 o'clock, after some introductions, I'm told by my two bosses at that time, Neeraj Swaroop and Nitin Gupta, that I have been handed over as my first assignment, Madhya Pradesh, as a state for sales. And at 4 p.m., we are doing phone calls. Those days we had to book a phone to Bhopal, Jabalpur, Raipur, Indore to talk to the individual salesperson who handled that particular location. And that's it. I was taken, given a state, and then said, go learn. I did not know anything about the cosmetics. I did not know anything about sales. I did not know anything about the industry. All I think Ponds leaders, when they recruited someone like me, knew was that I was hungry and I was eager to learn. And that was the culture that I spent 7 years in. So when people ask me, why do you have this belief and why do you have that belief? Why do you do this and why do you do that? Often my answer is, I learned that in my first 7 years in Ponds. I learned how to deal with people. I learned how to manage people who are 25 years older than me, much more experienced with much more knowledge. And how do you make them teach you? Most often I've learned from people who work for me. And that's one of the things hopefully I'll talk about. So with that, thank you once again to MMA. Thank you to you, Mr. Balraman, for inviting me. And thank you, Group Captain, for orchestrating this. So let me see if I can share the screen.
Okay.
Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So what I'll try to talk about is what is a high performance culture and how do you do those two questions. So let's talk about the company that I'm now a part of, which is GENPACT. It all started with one idea. And the idea was that work can be done from anywhere. At that time, we were part of General Electric, so GE, from India. I was part of the GE team in India. And we said we can do a lot of things from India to serve the world because we have great people. That's it. That was the only basis on which this enterprise that today, Mr. Balraman described, exists. And what we said is that therefore the basis of the entire company will be learning. We were one of the first to do this. This was 1998. And the idea, as I said, was we'll create a learning organization. And based on that learning, we'll serve the world. One of the things very early we decided was to look at a bumblebee. Aeronautical and aerotechnical tests actually say that the bumblebee cannot fly. If you take the wingspan of the bumblebee and take the weight of the bumblebee, all aerodynamic calculations say the bumblebee will not be able to fly. Actually, the bumblebee doesn't know this. Therefore, it flies. So our philosophy has always been that one of the most interesting things that you can create in a culture is to have no fear. And the biggest fear that people can have is the fear of fear. So one of the examples we describe is if you are going to jump off a hill at the top of a hill, and let's say you have a parachute that is tied to your body, the best way to jump off a hill when you're at the top of a hill is not to look down. Because if you look down, the human mind starts fearing the jump down. So the easiest way to jump off a hill, as long as you have a parachute, is not to look down, then you'll jump off. And then the parachute opens and you're safe. So one of the most interesting things about culture that we think about is how do you have a culture where fear is not talked about and the fear of fear is not there. So Group Captain, can we have the first poll question?
Shankar, can you go ahead, please?
Just a second, sir. Yes, sir.
So you're going to see a question here, and as it comes up, which of these two, culture or strategy, is more important? I think Mr. Balraman kind of revealed it a little bit, but between the two, which do you think is most important?
But honestly, I still do not know how you can have culture without strategy. I haven't understood.
So it's pretty clear that it's either culture or it's both equally important, which is a good place to kind of end with. I think that the saying "culture eats strategy for breakfast" comes from Peter Drucker. The one that I have used often is culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Our view is that if you know where you want to go, so that's strategy. If you have a great way to execute it, which is wonderful, but if you can't take the whole team behind it and sustain it for a very long period of time, then actually it all will fail, in spite of a great strategy and great execution. So, one of the things that we've always had in mind is culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's what, in those first 7 years, I learned being part of Ponds, and then continued that in various other portions of my career, and saw in many situations where that was not the case, often in the end failure, and where that was the case, long-term success being generated. So what is culture? And before we get there, there's a lot of confusion people think about when it comes to things like strategy, purpose, value proposition. So the way some of us think about it is purpose. Purpose is, why do we exist? Why do we exist as a company? Why do we exist as a business? So the existence can be that our objective is to make the world a better place. Our objective is to make the life of people, very enjoyable every day, or to create joy in life, or to create entertainment for people. That is a very high-level purpose that typically sustains for a very long period of time, multi-decades. Then you come to, why does the employee come to work every day? Then you come to, what's the strategy for the business that allows you to win? And what are the reasons that make you believe that actually all those choices that have been made are being lived every day? And what culture is that it's the atmosphere around us. It's everything. So purpose, employee value proposition, strategy, and reason to execute every day is immersed in an atmosphere called culture, which is why in the end, culture is very, very important, because all the others exist only in that atmosphere. So what is culture? So one of the definitions I like, there are many definitions. They all kind of are similar to each other, but the one that I like is, it is the way individuals, an organization, a team interact and behave and take decisions with each other when absolutely no one is watching. And I thought when Mr. Balraman talked about Ponds, there were no control mechanisms and rules. That's exactly what culture does. You don't need control mechanisms and rules, even as you grow, if you can find a way that people behave in a certain way, irrespective of anyone watching them. When you look at the bombing in the terrorist attack in Bombay, and you listen to what the employees at the Taj Hotel did, one of the things that Mr. Ratan Tata talks about is how the employees did what they did, not because they were trained to do it that way, but because they thought that is what we do every day. What is the difference? The customer always comes first, and everyone behaved in a certain way, and they all basically said, all that matters is the customer. We will put our own lives at risk. That's what we think culture is. So I'm just going to use our example, but this is applicable to any enterprise or business. I want to start with the right-hand side of the chart. So what should culture achieve? So culture must be very aspirational. It must be really something that you may not have today fully, but you're trying to get there. Mount Everest. It must be very memorable. It must be very universal and globally applicable. When an organizational culture can transcend local cultural boundaries, then it is fantastic. It must work at the macro level as well as the individual incident level. So in this particular situation, what decision do I take? Culture should inform you that this is the right decision to take. It obviously must be relevant to your clients as well as employees. And it must be real, which is people must see everyone living it and leaders living it every day. And it must connect to strategy. And it must be a differentiator in the marketplace. So for us, the 4 words that define our culture are curiosity, incisiveness, courage, and integrity. Everything is on a bedrock of integrity. So I want to dive a little bit deeper on 3 of these words. I think integrity everyone gets. I want to dive a little bit on particularly the one that I like the most, which is curiosity. So I'll start with, we all know that the half-life of various skills is dramatically shrinking. It's a volatile world. It's an uncertain world. There's so much innovation. One of the biggest dangers that we as leaders face and organizations face is a pretension that we've arrived in life, that we have conquered the world, that we are the best. Often history shows us that companies that declare they are the best at something, that often is the beginning of the end. Leaders who declare that they've reached the pinnacle, it's the end of that leader as adding value. So ego is the single biggest danger that organizations, teams, and businesses can have. And therefore, the most important question that people should grapple with is why. So maybe good time to throw up a poll question. And this is the last poll question of my presentation, Group Captain.
Put the second question, please.
And the question as it comes up is, which is the most important question in life, in situations, at work? Is it what? Is it who? Is it why? Or is it how?
You got 100% right.
I think it looks like the whole audience is gravitating towards the question of why. I think human endeavor has spent centuries exploring the why. Why do we exist? Why does the universe exist? Why does this happen? And why does that happen? Newton's question was, why did the apple fall? And for us, our belief and my belief is that curiosity is what fosters that question, why? And it starts with, are you comfortable saying, I don't know? The moment you ask why to a group of people, you're revealing ignorance. Are you very comfortable revealing ignorance? And it doesn't matter if you're the CEO of the company. You're not supposed to know everything. And actually, you don't know everything in any case. So can you keep asking questions? When you encounter something that is the opposite of what you believe, is your first response saying, I don't agree? Or is your first response saying, why do you believe what you believe? Why did you say what you say? If someone says the sun rises in the west, can you actually get yourself to ask the question, why do you think the sun rises in the west? Because maybe at the end of that, the belief that you have, which is the sun rises in the east, which you think is a fact, maybe at the end of that conversation, you say, actually, I agree with you. Sun does rise in the west. And then that leads to a lot of other things. It leads to 3 things that we think are very important. Learning agility, collaboration, and diversity. So if you're curious and if you exhibit ignorance, then you are humble. And then you're saying, I want to learn. And you keep asking questions. Who do you learn from? You learn by surrounding yourself with people who you collaborate with. But if you surround yourself with people who are all very similar to you, then are you really going to learn? One of the biggest dangers in that learning environment is if you don't have diversity. So let's start with the first one, learning agility and hunger. I talked about how in the early days of ponds, people like me were hired and thrown into the deep end of the pond, almost metaphorically and, almost pun intended. In our company now, this is what we are doing. We go out to management campuses across the globe. We are hiring about 100 people a year, and we actually make them do the jobs of the top 1,000 people out of 95,000 people in the company. We do not test for, do you know this thing? Do you have this skill? We test for values. We test for curiosity. We test for learning agility. And we test for hunger. We find a tremendous success rate when you test for those things and give people jobs that they actually have no clue how to do. And then you throw them in there. Obviously, you protect them when they fail, because they will fail. And then you take them back into the deep end and throw them there. So that's the learning agility that we think is even more important than just experience and knowing. The second is collaboration. We are big believers that individual winners are not important. Teams winning are more important. We actually reward people for copying rather than saying, I have just solved the idea myself. Or someone who says, I have a clever idea. Have you checked with other people if they have solved it, in which case go solve the idea by copying other people. And then the other thing that we reward is, don't tell me that you solved the idea, because you've generated a value of 1. Can you find a way to multiply the idea by 100 by sharing it with 100 people? And then the idea has become 100. Do you reward people who actually always wear the company hat rather than the individual or the team hat? And how do you drive that through various communication methodologies? And then the last one is diversity. And I'll just pick one of them, which is for us, one of the diversities that we drive right from the senior levels of the company is gender diversity. We think that the world is still on a journey to actually achieve this. The only satisfaction that as a company we will have is when we achieve 50-50 diversity in the world and in the company. We are at 35% at the senior levels of the company. 10 years back, we were 15%, but we still have some way to go to get 50%. We have various programs to do that. And when you do that at the senior levels of the company, then everyone else follows, and it drives that in the company across the board. We think that when that is done, we get better ideas, we get different ideas, and therefore we build better solutions. So it's great to have a culture. It's great to have a framework around that culture. But really, that's only half the battle. The other half of the battle is, can you live it every day? And can you execute with that culture every day so people can see it? That's how you get 95,000 people to follow that culture after understanding it. So the next part of the battle is, how do you execute it and how do you spread it? And really, there's only one word for it, which is communication. Relentless communication, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. How do you go from 2 people in 1998 November to 95,000 people, growing at 12% a year in terms of headcount? We lose about 20% a year because the markets that we are in, China, India, Philippines, Romania, the labor markets there are very tough and lots of people leave. Plus, we drive a hard performance culture. So the combination of those two things, 20% is the attrition rate. So 1/3 of the company is new every year. How do you drive culture when 1/3 of the company is new? There's only one way, which is communication. And the other word that is important in that communication is storytelling. Communication of rules and words is not as important as stories. So we are big believers in converting everything into a story, which makes it human with emotion, because then people remember it and they can then say, okay, I got it. I'm going to do the same thing. I will remember once in Ponds, in the very early days, I think the first month itself, when one of the big veteran salespeople in that group was a gentleman called Kapil Soni. And I remember after 1 month, I went to Kapil Soni and I told him, sir, Mr. Kapil, you know so much. I want to learn from you. I am your boss, but I want to learn from you. First of all, that took him by surprise. But then very quickly, he put his arms around me and said, you are like my son. I will teach you. He was 55. I was 25. I was like a son. And he taught me. What that did was he communicated that story to so many people. Subsequently, even today, I use that story inside my company after 35 years to teach people what does it mean to learn from people in your team and how do you drive that culture. I can say many words, but when I tell that story, people get it. So storytelling is the way we communicate, and we communicate relentlessly. And our big belief is you have to constantly unlearn. What was brilliant and worked 10 years back may not work today. And that's the world we are in. So how do you constantly learn and unlearn? And how do you leverage new technologies to learn? So I'll give you one example. 95,000 people as we speak today in the company are working from home in GenPACT, which is true for all companies in the world. How do we know the mood of every one of those people? Because if your mood is not good, then you're not going to deliver great service. So in the last 90 days, we've developed a chatbot that has an AI machine learning algorithm inside. The chatbot goes out every day to the 95,000 people and asks questions. It's like an Uber rating scale. And about 10,000 people answer every day. Not the same 10,000, different 10,000. By the time I get to the end of the week, I know the mood of 95,000 people. I know the mood of the group of 100 people in Philippines that seems to be a problem. I know that they are feeling depressed. I know that they are not getting the right support from their managers. This technology was not available 100 days back with us. It was available in the world, but we didn't know it. Necessity made this an invention for us, and we've now rolled it out. And as a result, the old way of managing, where our managers would go and sit with teams and look at them and talk to them, has changed, where they do that on Zoom, but they also get this information. So how do you constantly make people learn and unlearn and apply new practices? Same with the way we hire. Our hiring screens, our performance management, our promotions, all of that has to imbibe the culture that we have. So if you think the following values are important, do you incorporate that into your hiring? More importantly, this is an interesting chart. On the y-axis is, do you deliver results? So yes and no, 2 buckets. On the x-axis, what is your values? Do you share the company's values, and is your behavior company's values? The most difficult group of people are the top right-hand side. They deliver fantastic results, but they don't deliver company's values. They don't live it every day. They are the autocrat. They are the big shot. They are the egoist. They are the tyrant. Our view is that such great delivery of results won't last. But more importantly, they change the culture of the group over time. And that is a dangerous thing to happen. So our view is that such people should be coached to either change their values, which is, by the way, not impossible, but it has to be a quick change. Or I'm sure there are other places where they will be welcomed, because those values may be different and they will be highly successful there. So we actually teach our managers and performance management systems, how do you deal with this group of people? Everyone else you can coach. Obviously, the best people are the people on the top right and left-hand side, which is great performance, great values. So such people you should fall in love with. The bottom right-hand side is easy. They don't deliver results and they are not great at values. That's easy. It's the top right-hand side which are difficult. And that's where leadership really matters. And then the last couple of charts. Leadership is about, and driving a business is about balance, daily balance. You have to balance the short and the long term, profit versus growth, data versus insight, the ability to learn, but you must have the ability to forget as well and forgive people and move on. The ability to change, but there are some things that you have to stand firm. The ability to excite, but at the same time, you have to be stable. The ability to take risk, but you have to take balanced risk. Break tradition, but enforce those values and culture and policies that you think are core to the company and you'll never change. Move fast, rapid change, fail fast, but build consensus. So this balance, how do you drive this balance of competing priorities? The one North Star that helps is culture. Because you have to fall back onto your values and cultures. If I bring my values and culture, what's the right decision? So for example, for us, one of the values and culture that we believe in is the only thing that matters is our customer when you have to take a decision. What is right for the customer? In the end, take that decision. If you lose some money, it's okay, because long term, you'll make money. Of course, shareholders are important, investors are important. When you allow people to actually strike that balance by using culture, you normally end up in a good spot. So what do I do to do this every day? It has to be important for me. This is not an HR topic. This is not a 10 people in the company topic. This has to be all the leaders, and it has to start with me. So I do spend a lot of my time on people topics. I do engage in debate a lot. I love having 20 people in the room and we scream and shout at each other. Nothing is personal. And we fight topics. Often on a topic, if I find 20 people in the room or 19 people in the room are going in one direction, and I think that is the right direction to go in, I deliberately take the opposite position for the first 2 hours, because I want to extract the two people who actually have an opposite view, but groupthink is taking them in one view. So how do you create that Lincoln Douglas type of debate? How do you drive breakdown of silos so people can collaborate? That is it. That was my quick and dirty set of beliefs that we use to drive culture in the company. It is very, very tough to do this every day. The day you think you've done it is the day you start losing. So there's only one way to do it, which is you have to live and do this every day, and it is a battle every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Group Captain.
Would like to ask him a few questions. I got plenty of questions come from YouTube, Facebook, and also chat. Before that, you would like to ask him something, sir, or shall I go ahead with the question, sir?
No, you should go ahead with the question, but I'll ask him one quick one.
Yes, please, sir.
What is the one thing that is worrying you most every day, Tiger?
So I'll tell you what has been worrying me forever is, and I think you alluded to the question in your introduction, Mr. Balraman. As the company keeps growing, how do you do what I just described? Yeah. How do you get 95,000 people to walk the talk on culture? One wrong leader in one group can poison the system. How do you do that is something that worries me. But there's another worry, which is I don't think culture is static. So I'll give you one example. One of the cultures we've always prided ourselves on is flawless execution. We're an execution maniacal company. Do not make any...
Company, right?
Sorry?
You are a Six Sigma company.
Yeah, correct. Six Sigma company. Now, one of the things we realized about 6 years back is in the world of digital, if you want to embrace digital, then experimentation is part of digital journeys. Yes. Fast failure is part of digital journeys. That's a big culture addition that we had to do. One of the realizations we've had is it's easy to replace culture. Let's forget the old culture. Let's add this new culture, and that's all that's important. So let's go to only experimentation. No. Flawless execution is important, but in some cases, experimentation is also important. So how do you mix actually opposite cultures and make them coexist? Very difficult.
Another challenge you will face is culture is very much aligned to a leader. So when there are leadership changes in different geographies, you might have faced this issue and you might have managed it. Maybe you anticipated, maybe you trained, I do not know.
So great point, Mr. Balraman. So one of the critical inputs into promotion that we do as people go through various promotion cycles is, are they living the culture of the company? And as you get to bigger and bigger leaders, not only do you need to live the culture of the company, but then you need to drive it and get a lot of people to follow it. So one of the big selection criteria for succession is, are they going to live the culture of the company, even though they may be great performers?
Yeah, I understand. Group captain.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. There are plenty of questions come. The first question, I'll go to the YouTube, large number of viewers from there, from Starun. You got two questions. So one is, to what extent did being a part of GE help your business? And also, is it a hindrance with any client who see themselves as competing with GE?
Yeah, no, both great questions. So clearly we learned, and I learned a lot on top of the foundation that I built in the first 7 years with Ponds. I learned tremendous amount with GE. One of the first things I learned was how do you drive a culture in a 380,000 people company? And I think one of the iconic people who drove culture that I have seen for decades was Jack Welch. And watching him at a distance and what he did, the way he communicated was something I learned from there. Six Sigma and flawless execution. When he launched Six Sigma, we were just being born at that time in 1998. So learned that from there. And the third thing I learned is, one of the most interesting things was when you drive culture and you expect behavior, do you align your rewards to that?
Yes.
Don't align your rewards only to performance. Align it to values and culture as well. So for example, when stock options were given every year, he would test the logic of, why are you recommending this person for stock options? Don't tell me he's a great performer. Tell me what is his values. And great performer, not great values, he would take him off the options list. That I learned from GE. And competing companies with GE, we've always had a challenge serving some companies who were loggerhead competitors with GE, particularly in the early days when we became an independent company, 2005 to 2010. So an example would be Siemens, Philips, two examples, or Rolls-Royce. But today, because GE is only 10% of our revenue and $3.5 billion, a lot of that is other companies, it's become much better. So we don't have a problem these days.
Thank you, sir. The question from Mr. Kannan. Two questions. I'll combine similar question from other gentlemen too. Is culture the link between the strategy and execution? And also, you also request you, can you tell us a little more about the diversity journey in GENPACT?
Both great questions. Actually, I have never thought of the word linkage between strategy and execution. I think it's a great point. If Karan has made that point, great point, because I talked about culture as the atmosphere in which strategy and execution live every day. The other way to think about it is the link. You cannot execute whatever strategy, which may be a great strategy, unless you have the right culture. What is the enzymes in which billion years back cells came together and formed life on Earth? That's the way I think about it.
Beautiful.
And diversity. So when for 20 years, even within GE, we've been driving diversity in the company of all kinds: gender, race, ethnicity, global background, etc. One of the realizations that we had about 8 years back was, while we are a big company, actually we're a small company and we're a young company. When we compare ourselves to Unilever or Citibank or companies like that, 100 years, 150 years, we are a young company, only 20 years. So I decided that you can't focus on 20 diversity agendas. Let's pick one. So we picked gender. All the other diversity agendas are important, but they're done at the local level. At the company level, only one agenda, gender. And we've done a bunch of programs, but I said there are 2 or 3 things that I can do that I don't need anyone else's help. So in 2013, we had 0 board members who were women. I said, I can change the composition of the board. That is my job to change it, along with the chairman, not anyone else's job. So today we have 4 out of the 10 board members are women. We've just picked last week, for obvious reasons, based on what's happening in the US, and we have 10,000 people in the US, we just picked our second diversity agenda. First time in 10 years, we've added a second diversity agenda, which is Black and race equality, particularly in the US. And that has become now equal to gender in the US. And we've just started that journey 7 days back. So we have a long journey to undertake.
Fantastic. You see, in MMA, we had our first woman president with Kavita Dutt a couple of years ago. And we had been running for the last 25 years, a women managers forum with the very same objective. It has taken time to progress. But how do you manage gender in Japan? I mean, in Japan, the society doesn't accept a woman is equal to man.
Yeah, no, it is a great point, Mr. Balram. The culture in Japan is different. Obviously, the culture in each place is different, and Japan has that history. Our view is that you cannot allow that to come in the way. Because if you allow that to come in the way, then basically all our cultures will be local cultures. You have to find a way to mix it. So one, being sensitive to it is important, but that doesn't mean it's what you want. So we've had a significant agenda in Japan where we have leaders in Japan who actually drive it for us who are Japanese. So obviously, even within Japan, there is a change that's happening. We are one of the leading companies in that change.
Okay.
It is tough. It is tough in Japan to recruit leaders at that level. But we're driving it. We are behind in Japan as compared to many other places. But the good news is Japan and China, China serves Japan a lot for our operations. 5,000 people we have in China. 9 out of the 10 leaders in China who run China for us are women.
Fantastic. So, keep it up.
In fact, there's a similar. Please go ahead. Okay, there's a similar question which has come. You already answered, sir. How do you manage to establish your company culture in different national context? Somewhere the women are not accepted as equal to men. I think, Mr. Balram, you already asked the question. Let me move on to the next question from Mr. Venki. You want to know some companies are not the happiest place to work, but companies are performing extremely well, and the employees also accept the poor culture and pull along. So how do you react to such a situation in the organizations?
No, it's a great question. And I would focus my attention on the last 2 words of the question, pull along. The moment you have an employee base that every day comes to the office and says, I am going to pull along, how long is that going to last? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Maybe 10 years. 10 years is a long time. But 10 years is short in the history of 100-year journeys of the world and economies and businesses. So I think if you want multi-decade sustainability, then I think you cannot pull along. And I think the world is getting tougher to attract talent. And you will not be able to attract great talent. You might be able to keep talent within, but will you be able to attract the best talent? Question mark.
Super, Mr. Nandu, I see you there. In case you have a question, you wait. I'll ask one more question. You can come in case you have a question, sir. Now, there's a question from Mr. Arun. How do you link ethics to culture? While culture can be imbibed, ethics may have to be inherited. Your views on this?
Good point.
Ethics has to be inherited. Interesting. I never thought of that in that language, but you're probably right. Culture can be imbibed. You can mix cultures and come up with a mixture that is even better. Ethics. So when you have an ethics, I'm just reacting on the fly. When you have an ethics problem in a company, when you have an integrity problem in a company, including some senior people in the company, and you want to change, that's probably one of the most difficult changes. And it's not by imbibing a better integrity. In that case, you might have to do surgery. You might have to amputate your leg because your leg has gangrene. And I think we've seen many examples of that, which is why in our language, we say our culture is curiosity plus courage plus incisiveness on a bedrock of integrity. So the word bedrock means the foundation has to be integrity and ethics. Without that foundation, all these other things will fail. So if you have a foundation problem, then the only way to deal with it is to completely erase the whole building and rebuild everything. Unfortunate, but probably that's the only way.
There's a question which has come from the Facebook from Sir Rax. He says he want to know, how do you reward only teams? How does the individual employee learn? What are you encouraging him to do? Keep his mouth shut? What do you use?
So I think there are two different questions. They're both great questions. Until about 6 years back, we used to reward teams and individuals. We have a big annual meeting. It reminds me of the old Ponds India sales meetings, which were often in great places. My first Ponds India meeting was in Srinagar in 1985. 1 month after I joined the company, to go to Srinagar in a sales meeting was great. But at those annual meetings, 1,000 leaders and about 100 clients. So we invite clients as well for 2 days. We used to call teams and we used to call individuals and reward them. Until one day, 6 years back, one of our people, not at the leadership team, one level below, came to us and said, "We think teams are more important. Why are we rewarding leaders, individuals as well? What if we switch to all awards being only teams?" So we thought, wow, what an idea. We implemented it. Since then, we have given 0 awards in 6 years to individuals, only teams.
Fantastic. Super.
And we drive that in the company. So the other question was, how do people learn from? So we encourage people to own up to mistakes. When I talk to people about stories, I actually talk about, here is this person who made a mistake, and the person raised their hand and said, "Look, I made a mistake. I need help." And then we found a way to solve the mistake. And then we actually made that story a great story. And we said, these are the people who are great people. The other thing that we've done is we have a technology tool that we call Alert. It's similar to what I think Toyota has in its factory, where anyone can ring a bell and stop the factory.
Fantastic. Yeah.
95,000 people in the company can actually send an alert and say, "I have a problem in Bucharest in this particular operations. I am telling all of you that there is this little problem." It goes across the company, and anyone who has an idea will jump in and say, "Here's my idea for the solution," etc. And then we use AI machine learning to actually understand, are similar problems happening across the globe? Does it mean there's a pattern out here? Do we need to solve something else as a pattern? But people feel encouraged to actually say, "I have a problem, I have a problem, I have a problem."
So we got a number of questions. I think another 15-20 minutes to go, sir. I'll squeeze in as many questions as possible because your thoughts on each of the questions is so fascinating, sir. So there's a question from Venkateshwaran. You want to know any thoughts on managing culture, pre-COVID days versus post-COVID days, and when most are women or employees in your organizations?
Yeah, so I'll one of the things that I think COVID-19 has done, and we see it inside our company, but more importantly, we see it across hundreds of our clients, is I think the importance of time has gone up 100 times. So what does that mean? We've always been big believers that if you search for perfection, you might lose speed. There is a balance between speed and perfection. And the world has been on a journey to reward speed a lot, without sacrificing perfection in some areas. So if you're declaring the results of a public company, you cannot say, "I am not perfect. I have some accounting mistakes, big mistakes." Or if you're flying an airplane, you can't say it is okay to have 1% accidents. Not okay. So those areas are different. But in general, experimentation is about, let's try. And then let's quickly fail and learn and move on. We think that what COVID-19 has done is decision-making. I've never seen decision-making at a speed that I'm seeing now in C-suite of companies. We work with a company that I'm sure a number of people on this call remember and understand as Ponds, which then became part of Levers. We work with Unilever globally. Decision-making in Unilever as an example. Radically different. Big decisions being taken in 5 days versus 18 months. So I'm not talking about 2 weeks faster. I'm talking about instead of 18 months, can we take this decision by next Friday? One of the reasons I think that's happened is if someone says, I'll tell you next Friday, and today is Friday, it's 1 week later. When you look at the exponential curve of the virus spread, basically you're saying, I'll come back to you after the virus has spread by another doubling of the virus. So the notion of time in an exponential curve is very different from a linear curve. I think people are realizing that.
Oh, I didn't know this. Huh? Really?
Yeah. I think decision making has changed forever in terms of speed.
That's a huge impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a question from Mr. N.K. Prasad. He's been watching this program live on YouTube. His question is the demand for ever-growing quarterly results of management compensation linked to profits and ESOPs, diluting the culture of great companies? This was seen in Lehman, Volkswagen. How do we let community of shareholders, analysts, market understand that business are unpredictable and is perfectly normal to have divergent business results? Your views?
Oh, it is a fantastic question. It's a question that I think capitalism is grappling with. I think the world of capitalism has 2 or 3 questions that it is challenged with. One of them is capitalism really percolating wealth into society at the bottom of the pyramid? And I think the jury is out clearly on that. More and more, it's becoming clearer that it's not. And I think the other one is that question, which is our quarterly results with a single-minded focus on financial results of the quarter to honor commitments and satisfy one stakeholder group, which is shareholders. Is that going to achieve long-term success? I think it's pretty clear that it doesn't. The question is, are your rewards mechanisms short-term or long-term? If your rewards mechanisms are short-term, then people will be driven to short-term results, and that will drive the ethos. More and more, I think there is this view that multiple stakeholders are becoming important. More and more companies are declaring that. I don't think it's easy because it's a big change. Shareholders, customers, employees, and community. I think COVID-19 is making people realize that it is important. If you are today on a journey to declare profits that are better than let's say before, and one of the ways you've done that is by firing a whole bunch of people, I don't think the world is going to forgive you. Very clear. So for example, we have very clearly gone down the path of, at the bottom of the pyramid, we have, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 people who are right now, what in our business is called on the bench, trying to learn new things, not right now serving a client. But they are there in the company. We have not asked them to leave the company because we don't think that's right. Now, it's a benefit for us as well, long term, because as we get new business, we can apply them. So the reality is all 4 stakeholders benefit. But capital markets has to change. Big investors and financial houses has to change. My view is that the change is coming.
Here is a question from the Facebook. He wants to know, sir, how many people would be in a team? How the teams are led in your organization? One leader at all times?
So the way, it's very similar to the way you would organize a sales team in a large sales organization or a factory in a large factory organization. You would have the people who actually do the work every day. Let's say this is the group of people who are actually passing accounting entries. We do a lot of finance and accounting work. And let's say a group of 20 of them will have a manager. And then you have a team of 200 with a senior manager that serves one client for all of finance. And then you may have a vice president who serves 5 clients in an industry. So we are organized by industry, within an industry by client, within a client by kind of work, and within that by manager. That entire chain of command must have uniformity and singularity of purpose and culture and strategy. Otherwise, the chain breaks. That's the most important thing.
It's a question from Dr. Ayaka Nusa. You want to know, how do you train and evaluate new recruits? Are you using the AI-based assessment, and how do you make them totally adapt to your organization's requirements?
So we are big believers that AI is not artificial intelligence; it is augmented intelligence, which means it's a combination of the human plus the machine.
Yeah.
So we do use AI to take away the mundane work, number one, of putting data together and building analytical insights. We take away the work and improve the work of creating insights every day, every week, every month, versus once a year. And we find a way to incorporate learnings every day versus once a year. That's what AI can do. However, you cannot take away watching people on how they behave. You cannot take away, do those people show empathy for other humans? You cannot take away, when confronted with a decision, what is right for the customer, what is right for the employee, versus what is right for today's profits. How did that person take a decision in that moment? No machine can evaluate that. Over time, the machine, I'm sure, can help evaluate that, but it's a combination. So we do use AI at various parts of the human resource system, but we never ever forget that in the end, it's actually the human who passes judgment. So the way we think about AI is all decisions that people take is a combination of two things: prediction and judgment. A machine can predict. Judgment, no machine can do. It's only a human. So the prediction can be that if I go for my run, a 99% chance that it is going to be very hot and I'm going to feel very uncomfortable. That is the prediction. My judgment is that's okay. I'm going to live with that heat because I'm going to enjoy that last 1%. So it's fine.
Well said.
Super, sir. Super. So it's a question from Mr. Uday Shankar. He's from Vishwa Yoga Kendra in New Delhi. You want to know, sir, without strategical intervention, how right culture can be built vis-a-vis, if you can throw some light on how it will be great. So how do you build, without a intervention, how can you build a culture in an organization?
So I'll start with one of the benefits that some companies have is that they start from a clean sheet of paper. Right? So we had that benefit. We started with our first employee who got hired in 1998 when we set up this business. So we had the opportunity to actually, a few of us sit down and say, what is the culture we want? And then we quickly learned in the first few months and years to solidify that. Startups have the same opportunity. We often work with startups because they build some great technologies and bring that technology to serve our clients. There are startups who are fantastic, even though they are so small, at building a culture that is so good that we know they can scale. And then we see startups that have a fantastic product, but the culture there is actually not going to be sustainable, so they will not scale. So that is startup. So that's an advantage if you're a startup, if you're starting. Do not make the mistake of saying culture we can deal with later. Deal with culture when you're very small and young. And every new person you hire, evaluate based on that culture, and then constantly evaluate, is that the right culture you want? If you have a large enterprise, 10,000 people, and you want to really change culture to a better culture, then it requires intervention. There's no other option. And intervention is a combination of bringing people with that culture. So I told you, we wanted a culture of experimentation. If you compare my leadership team today versus my leadership team 6 years back, only 1/3 of the people are the same. 1/3 of the people have been in the company for 20 years and have been part of my leadership team for 10, 15 years. They are the same. Another 1/3 are brand new people from the outside. And they were deliberately brought in to add new culture, to intervene and mix and match new cultures. And then the other 1/3 are people young in the organization who we realized actually can be a good catalyst for that new culture. And we double, triple promoted them into leadership positions.
Fantastic. You did that. Okay.
There's a question from Mr. Divakar. He says, You said the culture is what one behaves when nobody is watching. Is it that personality a person shows when nobody is watched, or the culture is something that adapts and evolve? Culture starts from the one end and change at some time other end. How do you control or drive a culture in an organization?
So again, great question. Culture that starts at one end and dissipates and gets diluted as it goes through the organization is a problem. So you can't allow that to happen, which is why you never ever should stop communicating about your culture. Never. The day you stop, you have to be a broken record. So we start almost every meeting reinforcing stories that happened yesterday or day before or the week back about, hey, here's what we heard. Here's an example of a great, and that's our culture. We celebrate that. And it has to be more and more stories that come from the ground that people can relate to. It's either my story or my friend's story. So you have to keep driving that. And two, that constant communication should be driven not just by the leaders, but by the chain of command right down. And you have to check that. Are your leaders driving that communication and culture? Are they? And I talked about the performance appraisal system. If deep in the organization, the only thing that gets rewarded is performance and not values and culture, then you may drive it at the top, but you won't drive it at the bottom, then it's going to be a problem. So everything that I talked about cannot be only for one group of people. It has to be right through the organization.
There's a question from Mr. Kannan, sir. What role do the large and changing teams of employees have in shaping evolving culture in organizations?
Huge role. Huge role. So again, I'll talk about the culture change we did, because we did do a change 6-7 years back, as I said, where we added a whole bunch of fail fast, experiment. It's okay to tell the customer that 50% of the chance that 90 days from now, I'm going to come and tell you that the AI didn't work. Because AI is learning. AI is not perfection. AI is learning. So now, how did we know that that became important? I didn't know that because I didn't know AI. Deeper in the organization, we had people who we had hired to actually build solutions. And they came and talked to a bunch of our people, said, this is not going to work here. You guys are searching for perfection. So we have a lot of listening posts. So I talked about communication. I think I didn't talk about this. Communication cannot be one-sided. You have to find a way to have a lot of signal gathering, listening posts. So we have a lot of skip level meetings, which means every level should spend time with levels 3 levels down. So I'm not doing it now because of COVID-19, but every year I make what is called the India pilgrimage, end of the first week of December, because India is 55,000 people out of 95,000 people for us. So I make an India pilgrimage where 10 days I mark out and I go to 8 cities in 10 days. 1 full day or 2 days in every city where we have operations. And it's normally a 19-20 hour day. It starts in the morning and it ends with a big town hall where the whole city population gathers. Then it is. But I also have a number of sessions with the people on the factory floor. 1 hour with them, 1 hour with group at round table. And I might be hearing something from my leaders, but when I spend time with them, I realize that actually it's not getting down to that group. So then you come and do interventions because you realize there's a problem.
It's a question from Jay Chandran. In fact, you want a story from you. His question is, sir, communication by storytelling to instill and sustain culture. You said necessary. Can you explain this in a typical story which you use quite often in your organizations?
So many. So we were trying to build a relationship with a new large global enterprise, and we'd been trying to do that for 10 years. There are enterprises that are iconic brands that in our business, you can have an aspiration to build a relationship. For example, I had an aspiration to build a relationship with Unilever for 13 years. Only 18 months back, or 24 months back, we started our journey with Unilever. So there was a similar large enterprise that we had a aspiration to build a relationship. There was a team that was focused on doing that. And a couple of opportunities that came up, they failed. And there was another team that was doing a similar chase to try and build a relationship with another enterprise. One was in the consumer goods sector, the other was in the financial services banking sector. The banking group, on day one, basically asked a large group of people in the company a whole list of questions saying, here are the leaders in the bank, here are the board members in the bank, do any of you know these people, do you any have these connections, etc., etc., etc. And we use a collaboration tool, Microsoft Teams we use. And in the Microsoft Teams channel, there was probably 25 messages a day for 18 months. So just consider this, 25 messages a day for 18 months on how is that conversation evolving? Because in our kind of a business, about 100 people engage with 100 people in the client over 18 months to win a business. Because then you win the business for 20 years.
Wow, that's a lot of effort.
Yeah, so it's like a private label manufacturing for ponds. When you have a manufacturer who has a relationship who's doing private label manufacturing, once you win it, then you do it for 20 years, as long as you're delivering quality.
Yeah.
The other team, who also was doing a great job on everything, they had probably 1 or 2 messages updating what's happening a month. And they did not share until after 15 months who are the people they're trying to connect to. We did not win the latter. We are now one of the biggest relationships with the former enterprise.
Fantastic.
So another 6 more minutes. I'll try and quiz in. So many questions have come. I'll pick some of the questions which are very relevant and very interesting, sir. There's a question from Mr. Sam. I want to know, when you have a forced exit for a senior manager due to culture fit, how do you really communicate it to the remaining employees so that to be transparent on the exit and also ensure that exited manager reputation stay intact? This is a question with reference to your slide number 18.
Fantastic question. So I have a belief which I have to be careful because my, particularly my American friends and my US leadership team have told me that it may not work in all cultures, which I agree with. But my belief has always been, if you only describe what is good, Six Sigma teaches you that you don't understand what is good. The only way human beings understand what is good, you have to describe what is good and what is bad. You can do a contrast.
Yeah,
in Six Sigma, one of the analysis that you do, data analysis that you do, is compare the good versus the bad, and then do a root cause analysis of why is good so good and why is bad so bad. And then you get to action plan. So I've always had a belief that when something didn't work and you ultimately had to ask the person to leave and it was bad values, etc., you have to explain what happened, because then people say, now I understand what bad is. So I've always had the belief that you have to tell those stories. You cannot tell a story unless you humanize it, which means the story has to have a name, the story has to have a team, the story has to have a situation, it has to have a climax, it has to have all of that. My American friend had told me, no, you can't do that in the US because there is privacy, confidentiality, which is all correct. So we now do it, and I think we've all come to a happy middle ground. We tell those stories, we communicate it, we anonymize it. We still humanize it, but we don't use names. But those are important stories, very important.
Wonderful. The message is conveyed. So another interesting question from one of our YouTube viewers. How would you briefly describe GE culture under Jack Welch? Looking from outside, one felt that it was not people-driven, but one could be wrong simply because it was performance-based.
Yeah, so I think as someone looking inside from the outside, it is clearly something that a lot of people can come to that conclusion in a very honest and rightful way. It's only when you are inside and you've kind of drunk the Kool-Aid for 10 years or 11 years inside the company, and then 15 years outside the company, but still a very material insider because we serve so much. 15,000 people out of our 95,000 people still serve GE. So we are still close to GE. I would say it was not just performance. It was all of the things that I described. Now, is that something that was all pervasive? It is, as I said, it's difficult. And when you have major disruptions, like a CEO change, and I thought, Mr. Balraman, you called that out. When you have a CEO change, when you have a 9/11 in a business where 9/11 had a big impact, when you have a global financial crisis that has a big impact with that global financial, it is tough to maintain some of the things that we just talked about. And there is possible that, that some of that was lost at various points in time. The hope is that as enterprises lose that, they find a way to bring it back. And new leaders find a way to bring it back. And I think GE is actually on a journey to bring it back, is my view.
Okay.
Another few minutes, 4 minutes. So let me squeeze in a couple of more questions, sir. Question from Mr. Arunachalam. While recruiting, how do you assess the qualities of curiosity, courage, incisiveness, integrity, etc.? Even though the test and interviews are done, but many a time it doesn't really live up to the expectations.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll talk about, let's say, the top 5,000 people in the company, because as you go lower into the company, you won't be able to do what I'm just going to describe. I'll start by saying the more senior you go in the company, you have to be really, really clear that skills can be learned and skills should be learned. Do not recruit for skills. Do not test for skills.
Good point. Very good.
Test for culture, test for values, test for behavior. Do not test for skills. So what does that mean? It means don't ask highly objective questions and expect a highly objective answer as the right or wrong answer. A lot of your questions may be answers which are, this can be right, that is also right, this can be wrong, that is also wrong. There is no right or wrong answer.
Yeah, true.
A lot of questions. The third is, just as I said, storytelling and communication, interviews should be about extracting stories. So create a situation and ask the candidate to explain how they would navigate that journey if they were confronted with that situation in their past. So for example, we ask, tell me your biggest failure that you've had in your last 5 years in this job, and how did you navigate it? Why did you fail? What is your learning, etc.? One of the answers that sometimes people give is they say they think a lot and they say, I'm thinking. In the last 5 years, I don't think I've had any failure. Really, to describe it as a failure, you know that is not a candidate you want.
Sir, Mr. Sharma from YouTube, he wants to know, as your leadership style changed over the years, if yes, what are the main factors that has helped this evaluation of your leadership styles?
So that's a very tough question for the person himself or herself to answer. So I'm going to answer based on what people have told me. Obviously, as you go through life, experiences teach you. Your beliefs over time get shaped by those experiences. There are core beliefs that hopefully over time get reinforced. So one change that has happened is my beliefs on a bunch of things have got reinforced so much that they've become really solidified beliefs. So my belief that the only way to succeed is if you make groups succeed, that skills don't matter. And actually it's that communication wins in the end, that culture is the most important thing. Those beliefs are very tough for me to change because it's got reinforced over 35 years. But I've learned so much in the last 6 years on experimentation, on the joy of failure, So as an example, one of the interesting things I learned was in the digital journey, and this is actually learning by listening to podcasts. So I listened to a whole bunch of podcasts about 5 years back on startups. And there's this lady, I don't remember her name. She talked about how do you go from startup to scale. And she said, in a startup, and as you're scaling, you're going to have 5 problems, 10 problems, 20 problems. And she called it fires. You have a fire here, you have a fire here, you have a fire here. If you are a leader who jumps on a fire and tries to douse the fire, you will never scale because you're constantly dousing fires. And startups is all about fires. If you are a person who gets frustrated by fires and mistakes, then you're not going to scale. So she said the recipe is 3 things. 1, it's okay to have a lot of problems and a lot of fires in a startup trying to scale. Number 1. Number 2, be clever to understand which fire is going to become an inferno tomorrow morning. And the day it is going to become an inferno, jump on it. And 3, and 3, as you watch these fires, do you find some patterns? And then based on those patterns, do you have a solution that doesn't douse 1 fire, it douses 20 fires at the same time?
Good, very good. Yeah.
Very good.
What is the name of the lady?
I think it was, her last name was Tobacco Wala.
Okay.
And one of the startups was a Travelocity. Yes. She was one of the founding members of Travelocity.
Okay.
And then she joined this company that Sheryl Sandberg's ex-husband, started, SurveyMonkey.
Okay.
And she joined him as the sales and technology leader. And she explained some story. Great podcast.
Fantastic.
2 last questions, sir, because we have 3,000 viewers, so the questions are coming like tsunami. The 2 last questions. One is from Mr. Yadav. How to protect company culture values when we see some company gets project due to political favoritism?
When we see some companies, sorry?
Get contracts due to political favoritism.
Well, it starts from the original foundation of that culture, which is integrity. If the way you get contracts in the company is through political connections, I would say that's a foundational integrity problem. And the problem with that foundational integrity problem is, what if that political connection changes and there is a new political ruling regime? Doesn't that mean that your foundation is going to crack badly? Aren't you going to actually get destroyed? So doesn't it mean that you should actually first prevent? So the culture change is not culture change. It's actually foundation change. So it's a problem. It's a huge problem. And I would classify that as an integrity problem. So not a culture problem.
One last question, sir. Do you get business by leading on low prices?
No, getting business by leading on low price is not our strategy. It can be a strategy. There are companies in every industry whose position and strategy is the lowest price, therefore the highest scale, therefore the lowest cost, therefore the best technology for that scale, and it's sustainable. But they keep innovating on cost, and that is a sustainable model. Our business, in our industry, it's a very tough path to take because we are a people business. That business has to be led by intellectual capital, IP, value creation. So we don't lead with low prices. We lead with what is the value I can drive for you. The second thing we lead with culture. Actually, we don't lead with culture as the second thing. We lead with culture. One of the things that we have realized over the last 15 years is the one word that our clients use when we ask them, why did you choose us? Is they say, let's start with, we fell in love with you. We fell in love with all of you.
Oh,
In our business, because it's a 10, 20-year relationship, and because it's a relationship at various levels of the organization with people, you have to like the people you work with. Because I'm not going to make a product and ship a product. I'm going to talk to you every day. And by the way, there's going to be a problem lots of times. When there is a problem, how do you deal with each other? Am I going to like you? are you going to say the right things? Which means it's culture. So you lead with culture. When you lead with culture and you lead with IP, you cannot lead with price. But that does not mean we sometimes don't say, this particular brand, this particular relationship is a 20-year relationship. This particular assignment, I'm going to do it at minus 50% margin because I'm going to go in and delight the customer so much that they're going to fall in love with me. And then I'm going to build a 20-year relationship. And at that time, it will not be price. But on day one, it is price.
Thank you, Tiger. I think we let you go and pursue your passion, weekend jogging and weekend marathon. And it's been a great session. And Mr. Balraman would like to say closing remarks before we close the session. We got over 3,000 viewers. A number of questions have come, but we put in the questions so that we combine them. So you answered most of them. So I don't think anybody will go disappointed. They'll go much wiser and with more wisdom. Mr. Balram, you have lots thoughts on closing remarks, sir?
Well, Tiger, that was a brilliant session.
Thank you.
Like Virat Kohli going for a 300 runs in 20 minutes. You maintain your clarity and presence of mind, and you explained your point of view. And now even I am convinced that culture is what is more important than strategy. What I did realize is something else. See, whenever I tried to reach you, and you were always very busy, and that is very unusual for the CEO of a very large company, because I'm used to CEOs who develop a strategy and the teams are executing, so the CEO has time. I mean, it's more like you are a brand manager or a product manager. He makes 3 or 4 big decisions in a year. Whereas in sales, you have to make about 100 small decisions in a day. So you were sounding more like an operational executive, a COO rather than a CEO to me. So I wondered, what is this kind of a leadership? He's apparently successful. Still, it is something that I'm not able to figure out. So now I have figured out why you travel for 200 days in a year. However, I do have one tricky question for you. I mean, if your organization is so dependent on you, as a shareholder, I will be very worried. Is that
succession? Yeah. Succession is always important in enterprises. And where culture is important, it's more important than probably anything else.
Yeah, but I guess you have taken care of that.
Yes.
The board is involved, but I don't think I'm ready to hang up my boots. So
no. There is. You see, this analysts and consultants use some word for this, the CEO risk or something like that.
Yeah. No, we have a very good leadership team that lives what I just described more than actually often I do, and they are more in the battlefield than I do, so they have to live it even more. So yeah. But that is the trickiest one. Succession in these journeys are the trickiest, which is why the question on GE was a great one. It's not easy for succession to happen in a culture-driven organization where the culture comes from the top.
Yeah. Thank you, Tiger. I think it's the time for you to start golf too as a CEO. Thank you so much, sir. It's a fascinating evening. Thank you, viewers, who are coming at such a big number. It's a really, you are the one who encourages to bring some outstanding speakers. You are the one who pulls some outstanding speakers to come and speak in this platform. I will now urge upon each one of you to convey your appreciation to our distinguished speaker by your reaction box, and go either clap or you thumbs up or whatever you think is good. Great, and thank you so much. It's a great evening and wonderful thoughts. I think we are all gone with more wisdom, and which is very, very essential in the present day situation, present crisis. One thing which you would like to share with you is keep watching our MMA program. Any of your friends missed this event by chance, not to worry. This is available on our website for next 1 year. So I'm quite sure this is going to be really a reference talk by many people to watch over the years. in whatever in their endeavor. Thank you so much, all the ladies and gentlemen joined us this evening. Thanks for all the Ponch veterans who have joined us live on YouTube as well as Facebook as well as in the Zoom. And thank you so much. We look forward to keep interacting with you for next few months. Thank you, Mr. Balraman. You are a real source of inspiration for us, and thanks to you that we are able to bring you some outstanding speakers to come and speak at MMA platform. This immensely benefit large number of viewers besides MMA members. Thank you so much, and stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. And bye-bye. And good night till we meet again.
Thank you very much, Group Captain. Thank you very much, Mr. Barman.